hoping to chat with Dr. Bryce Edwards, political commentator, round about now. However, he's just turned up, actually. In the nick of time, Bryce Edwards joins us on the program. Bryce, so lovely to see you. I was a bit nervous there for a moment, I must say. But thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
No trouble at all, Andrew.
It has been, I suppose, a bit of a rush back to Parliament, and it's always like that after the holidays, isn't it? You know, I mean, you'd know that as a dad, school holidays, the kids are a bit rambunctious for the first couple of days. We certainly saw that in the House yesterday, a bit of name-calling, a bit of argy-bargy, perhaps.
Yeah, there's a lot of pent-up sort of frustrations on all sides. Remember, this is a new government, and it's carrying out lots of reforms. The new government feels very confident, perhaps overconfident in sometimes,
Yep.
And you've got an opposition that is feeling that things are being wound back, that all the good work they think they did is being undermined. And so, they're taking it to the government. Meanwhile, you've got a lot of parties that have their own, sort of internal problems.
Yep.
Te Pāti Māori's got some, investigations going on there about donations and so forth. The Green Party have got their, quite considerable problems with Darlene Tana and the fact that she's now left, and they're thinking about the waka jumping. So tensions all round.
I mean, she's left, but she was there. She was sort of lurking in the back row yesterday, and didn't really say anything apart from some comments to journalists in the corridor afterwards. How do you think this one will play out, Bryce?
Oh, look, the tensions between her and the Greens are huge. She's turning up, she's being defiant. We haven't really seen her for the last 3 months.
Yep.
Maybe longer, actually. But yeah, the Greens, this is kind of living death to them having her there.
Mm-hmm.
And they have their annual general meeting coming up this weekend, the Greens.
Yep.
And at that, they'll have to decide about whether they want to trigger the waka jumping legislation and boot her out of Parliament. Historically, the Greens have been very opposed in principle to that legislation. So yeah, they're going to have to work out, I think they want her gone,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, but and they can just push that button, but they, will be seen as hypocrites if they do so.
Yeah, well, we'll wait and see on that one. Speaking of booting people out, though, the health board, the government has taken a step. Some people thought that it took them too long to get to this point. Other people says no, they should be spending money on other health priorities. But I suppose the next step with the health reforms from the government?
Yeah, so of course Labor centralised all of the district health boards 2 years ago, abolished the district health boards, created Health New Zealand. That was a huge operation. The jury is still out on whether that worked or not, but the new government think it hasn't, that it's been botched and it's costing a lot of money. It's in deficit. It seems to be running a deficit each month of $130 million.
Yep.
So quite a considerable amount. Meanwhile, the new government say that the numbers have gone up in terms of staff in the back office.
Wow.
And so that's where they think there's a bloat. Of course, there's a lot of debates, about this, and it's when you look into the numbers, the aging population, inflation does mean that the government needs to be putting in more and more money, and arguably they just haven't put in enough.
Yep.
And so we're seeing a lot of commentators saying, well, actually, it's not so much that there's an overspend, there's just underfunding. But like you say at the start, we now have a new person running the show, Professor Lester Levy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he now has replaced the whole of Health New Zealand board.
Yep.
And he'll be making the decisions. He's got a pretty decent track record of
wasn't he the
running
chairman of the board, and now he's the commissioner? That, I mean, essentially it's the same dog without the bureaucracy, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, he's going to have a lot of power.
Yeah.
So, instead of a board making all these decisions,
He's the health czar. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if the government really trusts him and thinks he's, you know, uh, someone that can magically fix things, then that will be great. But some of the issues there are pretty huge,
Yep.
and I mean, I think the government is correct to say that the reforms haven't gone as well as they should have,
Hmm.
and that the implementation of them has been somewhat botched. I'm just not sure whether they have the answers for this in terms of cutting the budgets and starting to decentralize it into 4 regions
Yep.
again.
Yep.
It might work, but I don't know how much confidence we can have in that. There's going to be it's going to be a big story for a long time now,
Yep.
because this does affect so many New Zealanders on a day-to-day basis. The waiting lists, all the stuff ups that can happen when the reforms aren't working, when management isn't working. It does, it is a life and death
Yeah,
situation. So,
exactly. People's lives are on the line if we get this wrong. So
yeah.
yeah, certainly some pressure in that regard. The other big story for today is the tabling and presenting of the Royal Commission of Inquiry into a child abuse in state and faith-based care. To give, I think that's its long title. This has been a long time coming, and again, a lot of people very emotionally connected with this story. Be presented to Parliament today. The Prime Minister's already given an indication that there will be a formal apology later in the year. But how do you think the government, how do you think Parliament will respond to this, Bryce?
Oh, look, this is a solemn issue that there's not going to be bickering about, and there's going to be a multi-party consensus to a large degree on this. So, of course, this came into being back in 2018. This is a Royal Commission that's been running for nearly 6 years, looking into, all the authorities that have been in charge of children, especially state institutions, but yes, also faith-based institutions, and where they have at times neglected or been, criminal in the way that they have looked after children.
Yep.
This is a huge inquiry. It's New Zealand's biggest Royal Commission ever in terms of how long they've spent. I mean, the report itself, I think Christopher Luxon has said it's 14 kgs heavy or something,
Wow.
and he's already had a copy of it, so he's been going through it, and he's talked about how horrific, some of the lessons are in it, and so I think all of our political parties and politicians are going to be united in receiving this report. I think it's 4 o'clock today. It goes into Parliament.
Yep.
It also goes to the Governor General. But then there's big questions about, what it recommends, and how we fix some of these issues.
An
Will there
apology
be
may not cut it. I
prosecutions?
suppose there'll be thousands of people who are saying yes, but what about reparations? And
Yeah.
given the scale of the problem and the the ugly and evil nature of these crimes committed against children, now adults, I mean, that's going to be quite a high demand financially upon any government moving forward. An essential part of the healing and restoration. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, look, yeah, it's a hard one. And like I say, because I think there won't be any political parties that are necessarily, going out alone on this one. If there's a mood for reparations, for compensation, for culpability, I do think the politicians will come together on this. I
Hmm.
mean, there'll be some elements where there might be some room for a bit of a culture war when it comes to, is this part of colonization?
Yeah.
Is this part of religion? Because, there are some faith-based elements involved.
Hmm.
Already seen just this week, the Jehovah Witness Church have tried to have their part of the report suppressed,
Yep.
essentially, and they've failed. So, there's going to be a lot of faith-based institutions that are also going to be part of this discussion. It's
Definitely.
not just going to be at Parliament.
Now, we'll be talking with the National Director of New Zealand Christian Network, Reverend Dr. Stuart Lang, to get a faith-based response to that, and we'll be talking more about this a little bit later in the program as well. But Bryce, in the meantime, thank you for your political analysis of what is happening in Parliament this week. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.